Hello, it's Ruby, and today I am going to be filming my very highly requested bookshelf tour. The last one of these I did was back in 2017, beginning of 2017, so wow, this is very long overdue. So I'm not gonna lie, my bookshelf isn't that different to my bookshelf 3 years ago because I do like the system I have, but I have changed it a little bit and there are obviously different books on the shelves, so I am going to be telling you every single book I've got on my bookshelf. Also keep in mind that these aren't all of my books. I keep a lot of them downstairs because we have a study with some library shelves, like bookshelves on one of the walls, so I've got 6 or 7 shelves in there as well, but these are my favourite books. And this is like my second favourite part of my bedroom after my desk. I just love having all of my books here in one place. So here we have my classics shelf. On the end here, just for decoration, I've got this little cinnamon ornament with some embroidery wrapped around. Then I've got 5 of the Penguin Classics English Library editions. I do have a few more of these, but these are the ones I keep in my room. I've got Moby Dick, Gulliver's Travels, Kim by Rudyard Kipling, The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, and Villette by Charlotte Bronte. Next I've got this beautiful collection of translated short stories which I got for Christmas. This book is absolutely stunning. It's pretty big. Next I have a copy of Jane Eyre. Again, this edition is beautiful. See, it's kind of metallic. It's almost leathery, but it's not leather. That's what it looks like inside. Next I have this copy of The Nutcracker. I've actually taken this out of the library at university and I wasn't able to return it before I went home, so I've got it with me here. It's this collection of short stories by Sherwood Anderson. Anderson is a really great writer. I really love his work. I haven't read this yet, but I'm really looking forward to reading it. This book is also a library book and it is the selected poems of George Meredith. I read a couple of these when I was in the library and I thought the poetry was wonderful. This book here, I bought this recently from a charity shop and I have no idea what it's about or anything. It just looked quite interesting, and I love how at the beginning it was a special prize for good attendance in 1914, gifted again in 1953. I just love the history of old books that you find in charity shops. So as I said, here I have a few Charles Dickens books. I do have a lot more downstairs, but these are the 3 I've got in my room at the moment. They're quite dusty. These books are some of my very favourites. They are just absolutely stunning. And they've got the original illustrations. So the ones I've got here are American Notes, Master Humphrey's Clock and Life of Dickens. This one is Nicholas Nickleby, and this one is definitely my most worn of my editions, which has got A Tale of Two Cities and A Christmas Carol, as well as a few others like The Chimes, but the big one is A Christmas Carol in this book, and I've read it many, many times. Next here, these are obviously not old books, these are new books, but I think they're really beautiful. So this first one is my favourite poetry anthology at the moment. It's the Four Seasons poems by the Everyman's Library Pocket Poets. Everyman does really beautiful books, and this is just a collection of poems separated into the seasons. This is summer, and then it gives you a collection of poems. I haven't read this front to back, but I love dipping into this and I would highly recommend it. I really want to get some more of the Everyman Pocket Poets, and they also do collections of short stories. I've got my eye on one of Parisian short stories, like stories set in Paris. Then here I've got 2 of the Macmillan classics. These are beautiful, beautiful books, and they have so many of them, and I would highly recommend them because they are just stunning books. So the first one I have is The Green Gage Summer by Rumer Godwin, which I actually got when I was doing work experience with Pam Macmillan. They kind of gave this one to me, and I haven't read this yet. I've been waiting for the summer to read it, but I've dipped into it a little bit and it looks beautiful. And the second one I have is Classic Locked Room Mysteries, edited by David Stewart Davies. So now we come on to some more vintage books. As you can see on top, I've got a few of my Fred the Quills, and behind it also I have a New York Times postcard. So these are a few smaller classics. When one of our neighbours died years and years and years ago, this was when I was like 3 years old, my dad cleared out her house for her because there was no one to clear it out, and she had a collection of vintage books, so he ended up taking a few of them. So I've claimed some of these for my own. The first one here, wow, can you believe it? It is this collection of poems by Walt Whitman. I love Walt Whitman's poetry, so it's this gorgeous, gorgeous edition. Then next I've got Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. I love this book again. It's one of my favourites. This is one of my favourite classics. If you're just getting into classic literature, then I would really recommend this one. As you can see, the spine is a little bit tattered and I need to glue this down. So then next here, this is one edition in the complete works of Shakespeare. So this one has got The Tempest, Two Gentlemen of Verona, Merry Wives of Windsor, Measure for Measure. I want to see if I can find the rest of these in charity shops. I want to collect the complete works because I would love to own the complete works of Shakespeare in vintage volumes. Then next I have got the collected poems of John Keats. Again, Keats is one of my favourite poets. I just love that, November 1920. And I always love in old poetry anthologies when you move past the wax paper and then it's got the title. The final book I've got here is Lady Chatterley's Lover, which I haven't read yet. This one is very, very worn, as you can see, like the pages are really discoloured, but I just love that. I think it adds to the beauty of the book. So then we move on here. Obviously these books are a lot less beautiful, but I do really love the mini Penguin pocket books. These are Penguin Classic pocket editions, and basically these only retail for £1, so they're really affordable. You can just get like the best bits of an author's work. The ones I have are Dante, Circles of Hell, Christina Rossetti, Goblin Market, Edgar Allan Poe, The Telltale Heart, and my most recent edition is The Sandman by E.T.A. Hoffmann. Finally here I have some paperbacks. The first one I've got is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. This was a gift from my friend Madison. Madison was studying in Exeter last year, but she's from America. On the day that she left her copy with me, so this is actually so lovely to have and I really do appreciate it. I've got 2 orange penguin books. I really want to collect more of these and they're just really pleasant to read. So the first one I have is Memories of a Catholic Girlhood, which is the best book I've read so far in 2020. And the second I have is The Thurber Carnival by James Thurber, and I haven't read this one yet, but I look forward to doing so soon. The next book I have is this collection of short stories by Thomas Mann. Next I have another Sherwood Anderson book. This is Winesburg, Ohio. I would very highly recommend this. This is one of my favourite books I've read. This copy isn't actually mine, I've got to say. This is an English teacher of mine's, and when they left the school I still had it in my possession and I couldn't find it to return it, so he said to keep hold of it and then it would be an excuse to get back in contact one day. So I really like this as well because he was one of my favourite teachers. Next, this is the book that got me into American poetry and American literature in general. Maybe even poetry in general. Poems from the great American authors like Whitman, Poe, Emerson. It's also got some Dickinson. This is what really got me into Dickinson, actually. Again, there's a funny story behind this book. Isn't it just beautiful? Just appreciate how beautiful this book is. They did a big clear out of our school library when I was in year 9. Did a big book sale for all of the fiction books, but for the non-fiction, our librarian realised that no one was actually going to go ahead and buy these books. But she did invite me at the end of the school day to come and look through them to see if there were any I wanted to take back. And this one she had put aside for me because she knew it was the book that got me into poetry, so this is a really nice memory because, as I said, it got me into American literature. Then next, I've got this collection of essays by Virginia Woolf. My favourite one is Street Ramblers. Next here, I've got King Lear, which is one of my favourite Shakespeare plays. And finally, this one isn't really a vintage book at all, but I've got this collection of poetry by Federico Garcia Lorca, and this is a parallel text, so you've got the Spanish on one side and the English on the other. There we go, so that's my favourite shelf. Okay, so now we come to my second shelf, which is basically a collection of some of my very favourite books, and the way that I've organised this is from youngest to oldest. I mean, obviously like halfway through it gets harder to judge, but I start with childhood books and I go into YA and then I go into contemporary. The first 2 books here, the reason they're right at the end is actually because of the shape of the books. I wanted them all to look really neat together, so as you can see they're all the same height. The books I've got here, I Am David, which is wonderful. And I've also got my edition of Little Women. Next I have my copy of Peter Pan. I love this edition and the pages are all torn and serrated, which is lovely. Next, of course, I've got my copy of Matilda. As you can see, a lot of these books are ones that influenced me greatly. That's why I like to keep them still on my shelf. I've got my very worn and very loved copy of The Little Princess. This is probably my favourite book of all time, and even though there are some much prettier editions out there, this one is so sentimental to me that I definitely couldn't choose another. So this is what it looks like inside, and it has got the original illustrations in, which I love. I don't think you can go for an edition of A Little Princess which doesn't have the original illustrations because they are just gorgeous and you miss out on a lot without them. Next I've got some middle grade books. So the first one I've got is The Clockwork Sparrow. I've also got this book by Kathy Cassidy, Summer's Dream. I've got the wonderful wonder by R.J. Palacio, Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones, Coraline by Neil Gaiman, which I used to actually read every single year the night before we went back to school for the autumn term. I've got Love, Aubrey, which I have read many times. So this is The Clique by Lucy Harrison. The reason I still got this on my bookshelf is because when I was in year 7, it was my favourite series. I read all 22 books in the series. Let me know in the comments if you read this series too. I've got Paper and Heart Society by Lucy Powell. This is a proof copy and I'm very proud of Lucy for what she achieved, so I like to keep this one on my bookshelf too. Next I've got The Strange and Beautiful Stories of Ava Lavender. This is one of my favourite books ever. The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I really want to reread this book actually because I read it 3 or 4 years ago now and it is wonderful. I read this one last summer and it was probably one of my favourite books I read over the summer. This is A Danger to Herself and Others by Alyssa Scheinmel. And then the final YA book that I have is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. So as you can see, I don't have very many middle grade children and YA books in comparison to how many I own and how many I've read. I mean, I've got a big bookshelf, but it's not big enough for all of my books. So now we move on to contemporary. I have got The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold, History of the Rain by Niall Williams, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. The way that the actual form is used to tell the story is really interesting. Me and Emma was one of my favourite books I'd ever read at the time I read it. I've got History of the Wolves by Emily Friedland. And finally for contemporary, I've got Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood, which I've said time and time again is one of my favourite books of all time. So then here we come on to more classics. Most of my classics are on the shelf below, but these are just a few of them. And I also have a lot down in the library, but these are the ones on my shelf. I've got The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I love this edition so much. The Story of an African Farm by Olive Schreiner, which every book on my bookshelves you can assume that I'm recommending to you because I'm very picky as to which books I keep on this shelf. I have Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Then I have 4 Sherlock Holmes books. I don't have the whole collection. I got the BBC editions, so I've got The Sign of 4, The Return of Sherlock Holmes, A Study in Scarlet, and His Last Bow. And these are really cool because they've got the forewords by the writers and characters in the show. Here I've got my very prized complete works of Emily Dickinson. She is my favourite poet. The Melancholy Death of Oyster Boy by Tim Burton. This is a collection of poetry. This is one of probably my favourite ever collection of short stories, which is The Man Who Walked Through Walls by Marcel Aimé. I've also got To Kill a Mockingbird. This is by far my favourite of their covers that they do. Here I've got another Emily Dickinson book. These are her envelope poems. It's just got some scans of her actual handwritten manuscripts on. I've got another collection of poetry. This is Ariel by Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath is another of my favourite poets. And to go along with that, I have got the journals of Sylvia Plath. I have 2 editions of Sylvia Plath journals. The first one is the one that's annotated that I've got all my notes and highlights in, but that's not actually on my bookshelf. But this book was actually a leaving school present from my English teacher. He knew how much I loved Sylvia Plath, so he gave me his copy, which is so lovely. So this has pride of place on my bookshelf. And then finally on this shelf I have got The Odyssey, translated by Emily Wilson, and this edition is so beautiful. Okay, sorry for this atrocious angle. On this side here I actually have things that aren't books. I've got this notebook, which is my book of dreams and ambitions and goals. This is where I put any really important lists. Then I've got this lovely notebook from Urban Outfitters. It says there are things worth fighting for. A photo album, which I got for my 8th birthday, and it's filled with baby photos, as you can see. Here I've got my meal planner. Here are some of my school magazines. So when I was at school, I was on the school magazine committee, and I was on committee for 3 years, and in my final year I was assistant editor. So these 3 magazines were ones that I worked on the committee, and this one I wrote 3 articles for, so I've also got this one on my bookshelf. So then I've got a few more notebooks. I've got this Paper Lovers book from Kiki K, this listography book, which gives you loads of different lists and you just like list things down. This is another list book that I got from my grandparents for Christmas. Finally, I've got this issue of Teen Vogue, which Emma Watson was on the cover of. I don't know why this is still on my bookshelf, but it's been on my bookshelf since 2013. So then we move on to this stack of coffee table books. Sorry, I've tried to change the angle. I hope that this is better. If you didn't know, I collect postcards, and so this is a beautiful collection that I received for Christmas. Next, I've got the 365 Days of Wonder book. I've got 4 books from my Simpsons Library of Wisdom. I do own the whole collection of these, but these were my 4 favourites. I've got the Lisa book, Flanders Book of Faith, the Ralph Wiggum book, and the Marge book. To go along with the Simpsons theme, I also have the Lisa Simpson Guide to Geek Chic. I have this book of riddles. I really love the idea of hygge, so I've got this one with some recipes and DIYs and things. And I've also got this lovely one, How to Hygge, The Secrets of Nordic Living. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, which was sent to me by Tamsin, who is my mum's cousin's wife. She is just so lovely, really kind, and she sent me this book. That was the most beautiful surprise ever. So thank you, Tamsin. I have another book on hygge. Why do I have so many books on hygge? Speeches that changed the world. These are transcripts of really famous speeches that were really influential. Next I have this book by Jordan Matter, Born to Dance. It's a collection of photographs and it's just a really empowering book. Next here I have the home edit, Conquering Clutter with Style. This is so beautiful. Next and lastly I've got the Book of White, which is a coffee table book by the White Company. This is probably my favourite coffee table book. Then this is my final coffee table book actually, which I've just got on the side here, Book Towns, which I received for my 18th birthday from my grandparents. It's just got a guide to the most beautiful bookshops in the world, which is amazing. So then here I've got some books that are just pretty. These are my nice hardback books. So I'm actually just going to take these down and show you here because it's really hard to get a good angle up there. So the first one I have got is Watership Down. My friend Blakeney and I decided we're both going to read Murder on the Orient Express at the same time, and I haven't actually read any Agatha Christie before, so I was searching for ages for a really nice edition because I didn't really like the paperback, and because it's such a famous book, I thought I must be able to find a nice edition somewhere. Next is a book I haven't read yet, but it's just so pretty that I wanted to keep it. I didn't want to keep it on my TBR pile, I wanted to keep it on my bookshelf. This is The Binding by Bridget Collins, and it looks really good. Just look at that spine. I've also got The Institute by Stephen King, which I read in October. I've got Multiple Choice by Janet Tajian. I've got Miracles from Heaven. I've also got this book, which I haven't read yet either, A Field Guide to the English Clergy. I did buy this one for the cover. I know it's not Christmas, but I've got A Literary Christmas by the British Library. It's an anthology of all of these short stories and poems which were written around Christmas. Next I've got my Bad Girls Don't Die series. I would really recommend this. The Austere Academy from Series of Unfortunate Events, which was my favourite in the series. Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. The Distance Between Lost and Found. Tinder by Sally Gardner. How beautiful the illustrations in this book are. The Little Prince. And also A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. Again, the illustrations. Finally up here I've got my very favourite picture books from when I was little. I am still a big fan of Christmas picture books. I think they're great. So I've got 2, I've got The Polar Express, and I've also got 25 December Lane, which my sister and I used to read probably once a week when we were little. I also have The Velveteen Rabbit, and I have The Incredible Book Eating Boy. He's eaten the book. This is a lovely book. And finally, I've got this one. It's the story of the soft toy bear that was on board the Titanic. There we go for top shelf. That was the hardest one to film. Next, we move on to my Harry Potter shelf. And yes, of course, I still do have a whole shelf dedicated to Harry Potter. These are the books I have. I have this Harry Potter colouring book. This is the programme from when I went to go and see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. I've got the Harry Potter Character Vault book. Next I have the Harry Potter Film Wizardry book. The final film hadn't been released when I bought this, so it's up to part 1. I've got the illustrated edition of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. This is a beautiful book. I also have the Harry Potter History of Magic book from when they did the exhibit at the British Library. I did go to see the exhibit and I thought it was fantastic. It's got loads of really interesting history in it. I've really enjoyed looking through this. Also, I've never taken the dust cover off. It's got a snake on it, that's so cool. Here I've got the 4 Harry Potter Illustrated editions. First one, The Philosopher's Stone, The Chamber of Secrets. Just look at that beautiful, gorgeous illustration of Hogwarts. My favourite book in the series is The Prisoner of Azkaban. Finally, The Goblet of Fire. As I said, I collect postcards, and this is another of my postcard sets. So this has got loads of different still prints from the Harry Potter films. Then I've got the signature editions of the first 4 books. I don't believe they did any more after this. I've never seen these ones for resale before, but I know that they sell this one at the Wizarding World shop. My parents bought these books in £9.99. They gave them to me when I got into Harry Potter. These are my like main editions. These are the ones I first read when I read the series, so they're really, really special to me. These are some of my most prized possessions. I love these books so much. But when my parents gave them to me, the first one was missing. I'm really, really glad that they still sell this one, so I bought this one at the studio tour. These editions so much, and I did want to complete it. So the Chamber of Secret, Prisoner of Azkaban, and the Goblet of Fire in the signature editions. The Order of the Phoenix, the Half-Blood Prince, and the Deathly Hallows. So then next here I've got my copy of the Tales of the Beadle and the Bard. Again, this is very, very highly prized and very dear to my heart because my copy is signed by J.K. Rowling. Then I have Quidditch Through the Ages. My friend Natasha got me the movie script of Fantastic Beasts. Don't you just love that cover so much? Next I've got the script of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. And then finally, here, this is my book, not for resale. This is a draft copy from when I printed it in paperback form, but it is a real book. Like, it looks like a real book. It's absolutely crazy, and you can buy this on Amazon now. I haven't advertised or anything, but it obviously doesn't have this grey mark going down it. I wrote this in 2017, so it's quite outdated, but if you're like age 9 to 11 and you're looking for a light read over lockdown, then you might like this. Then moving over here, I've got this Hermione Granger Funko Pop figure. I've also got this Skelligrew bottle, and isn't this just amazing? And I've also got some Chocolate Frog cards. These are the non-official ones. Then I've got the ultimate editions of all of the books. So I've got, well, it's actually the Sorcerer's Stone, They Must Be Made in America. And then I've got Chamber of Secrets, Prisoner of Azkaban, Goblet of Fire, Half-Blood Prince, Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2. Oh, where's the Order of the Phoenix? That's usually here. That must be downstairs. There is my Harry Potter shelf. And then finally, we have my non-fiction shelf. First of all, in this side here, I have university books. But on top of this, this is a book that isn't for university, it's just good fun. I've got the Oxford A to Z of Grammar and Punctuation. Next, I've got my university poetry book. So this is the Norton Anthology of Poetry, which is our set text for poet. I've got The Winter's Tale, The Lays of Marie de France, Frankenstein. This is a library book that I, again, wasn't able to return in time. So this is the Charles Dickens' Cambridge Companion. This book I bought way before university, book by Harold Bloom on criticism. This isn't a university book, this is just random. It's like every day it gives you a Stoic meditation. Then these two are actually from philosophy last year, the Simpsonian and Descartes' Meditations. Both of these were gifts from my friend Tashna. The Waves by Virginia Woolf, The Last Man by Mary Shelley, Flash Fiction, Staying Alive are both of my set texts for my creative writing module. Here I've got two more notebooks. This is the notebook I used for all of my notes last year at university, and this is the notebook I'm planning on using next year for all of my notes. Then I've got some autobiographies: Becoming by Michelle Obama, What Happened by Hillary Clinton, Positive by Paige Rule, Boy Erased by Jared Connolly, Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson. Next I have these three books on The Simpsons and Their Mathematical Secrets, The Psychology of The Simpsons, and The Simpsons and Philosophy. Here I've got two books by Alexandra Robbins. The first one is The Geeks Shall Inherit the Earth, and this is probably my favourite non-fiction book. It's The Overachievers, The Secret Lives of Driven Kids. Next I have two Richard Dawkins books, The Selfish Gene and The God Delusion, Albert Camus' The Outsider, this book on linguistics, Why Only Us by Noam Chomsky, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, Oxford Dictionary of Reference and Delusion, which is really, really good. I would highly recommend it. It's really interesting. This here is a history of my old school. I also have On This Day in History by Dan Snow, which tells you every day like something cool that happened on that day in history. And then finally I've got The Elements of Eloquence by Mark Forsyth. Okay, and then the final stretch, these are the last few books. This is a collection of telegrams and letters like from people who were on board Titanic, The Day the Bastille Fell, this book on unsolved conspiracies. I've got Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time and also The Grand Design, The Universe Inside of You by Brian Clegg, Everyone Lies, Remember the Alamo, History of America, The French Revolution by Christopher Hibbert. This is one of my favourites. When the Rivers Run Dry by Fred Pierce. Again, I would highly recommend this. The Definitive Book of Body Language, Eyes for Influence by Rob Young. This is a really interesting psychology book again. 500 Words You Should Know. I have this book, A Childhood at Green Hedges by Imogen Smallwood. Smallwood is Enid Blyton's daughter and it's basically her memoirs. I have this book, The Victorian Home by Catherine Ferry. Queen Bees and Wannabes by Rosalind Wiseman. Personality Disorders. This is again a book I really liked when I was younger. I used it when I was in year 8 for the first paper I ever did proper research for. And then finally here I've got Medieval Views of the Cosmos. Then here is my TBR pile. As you can see, it just stretches down the side of my bookshelf, and on top I've got the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series. Hollow City isn't here because that is the book I'm reading at the moment. Wow, that took a lot longer than I thought it would, but I hope that you enjoyed watching this bookshelf tour. I literally only filmed this bookshelf tour 4 days ago and I've already reorganized the whole thing. So I am just going to give you a quick overview of like the little bits that I changed, because I probably won't film another bookshelf tour for another 2 years. This is what it's looking like now. This shelf is pretty much the same. I have added a few new books. Anne of Green Gables, The Secret Life of Bees, The Children Act, The Go-Between, and Breakfast at Tiffany's. Up here you can see there are also a few new books, namely Great Expectations and Doppler. Then this is my classics shelf again, as you can see. There are a few new additions to this shelf. Murders of the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe, Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I've also lined these up instead of stacked them because it just looks a lot neater. So my Harry Potter shelf is the one that has had the biggest change. First of all, you can see that I've taken off the film books from this shelf, and I've also taken off the dust covers of these books. Then I've only kept these 2 Ultimate Editions in my room. I've put the rest with the DVDs downstairs so that I could make this a series shelf. So I've now got my Sherlock Holmes books here. Next to that I've got my Bad Girls Don't Die trilogy, and then the main reason I rearranged my bookshelf is because I really wanted to put my Miss Peregrine's Home Peculiar children's series on display. I love these spines without the dust covers. I've ordered the last 2 books in this series, so when they come I will take the DVDs out of the bookshelf, but for now they will stay. Okay, so with that said, I'm actually going to wrap up this bookshelf tour. I hope that you enjoyed watching it and I hope that you have a productive week.